Hello and welcome to the Warhammer YouTube channel. Today we'll be talking about Warcry, the new skirmish combat game set in the Age of Sigmar universe, and we'll be specifically talking about the Corvus Cabal faction. We'll be examining the different unit choices and using that information to help come up with a few starting list ideas to get you started. So let's look at the data. All right, before I get started showing you the spreadsheet, I just want to give you a little bit of background. If you haven't seen my videos before, you're going to see a lot of different color-coded cells in the spreadsheet, and this is kind of a rough guide on how those cells are colored. So based on the performance of that value in the cell across all of the different fighter profiles in the game, things that are colored towards more deep blue are going to be performing better on average than fighter profiles in the game, and things that are more red are performing worse than average, and yellow and green being right around average. So that should give you a rough idea of what you're seeing. There are, that being said, some subjectively colored values. For example, like the move characteristic, I just have, those are subjectively colored. Okay, so what we're dealing with here is a low durability, high damage warband. It's not on the extreme of the scale in terms of low durability. There's certainly some less durable warbands out there like Daughters of Cain, and it's not on the extreme high end of the damage spectrum like some other warbands. I think it's like Cypher Lords comes to mind, or if you count ranged, then obviously Stormcast. But there's some warbands out there that do higher damage, and there's warbands out there with worse durability, so it's a little bit more towards the neutral end of the spectrum, but that is notable about it. In general, this warband is going to be about dishing out more damage than you're probably going to be able to take. But in that being said, with the abilities and the overall theme of this warband, you have lots of different options for movement and scaling up terrain and doing things like that. So I think they've done a good job with this warband. It's very thematic, and I think it'll be pretty cool to play, although I probably won't end up playing it. So let's talk about the boss, the Shadow Piercer. This is with this warband, unlike some of the other Chaos warbands, the leader isn't necessarily the centerpiece of the warband. This is he's good. He's tied for the Shrike Talon for being the most expensive thing in the faction, as he probably should be for a boss. But visually and stats wise, he just doesn't stand out as the prominent key player in this faction. So he's there. He has a job, but it's not to be just the Death Star of the warband, running around smashing everything and getting supported by his troops. He's kind of there to support the troops as opposed to being supported by the troops. So different style of play here. Okay, so I'm going to show you the stats for the boss as well as the elite and the semi-elite troop at the same time. So the boss is the Shadow Piercer, as I already said. The elite troop choice, you only have one, is the Shrike Talon. This is the guy with the wings. He's really cool looking. When I first saw pictures of this warband, I just assumed that was going to be the leader. He looks like the leader, but it is not the leader. So that frees us up to potentially taking more than one of them. And then we have this Spire Stalker for 140 points. Now, this guy looks not that much different than the other line infantry and chaff troops in this warband. So, but he is pretty good. I think his stats are probably, this is probably a good point level for him. He's not a bargain by any means, and he's not overcosted or anything, but he is... he's pretty good. He hits very hard, not that durable, a good representation of the warband as a whole. But since he looks so much similar to the cheaper troops in this warband, I think there's kind of a sneaky element. You can certainly paint him up to look very much identical to those cheaper guys, and maybe if you have a less experienced opponent, they might kind of overlook the Spire Stalker and not pay attention to him, and then all of a sudden the Spire Stalker, using his abilities to quickly climb up terrain and then deal heavy damage on people, takes him by surprise, because they might put him in the same category as those cheaper troops. So you could potentially use that little bit of camouflage or, I don't know what you would call it, chameleon-like ability to blend in with the cheaper troops to your advantage tactically. Not that I would ever recommend such dirty, underhanded tactics. So, all right. So our boss and our Shrike Talon, they're 185 points. They're 20 wounds. So nice, you know, somewhat beefy wound profile, and everything. They're all of these choices here are toughness 4. The Spire Stalker is 15 wounds. So we're gonna, as we scroll across, we're gonna see. Keep in mind that the Shrike Talon is 45 points more than the Spire Stalker. And we'll see if that 45 points is going to be worth it. So right off the bat, 5 extra wounds. You know, that's 33% more durability because they have the same toughness. So you get 3 extra movement for your 45 points as well. And as you can see, they're very similar looking attack profiles across these two, except the Shrike Talon has 1 extra attack over the Spire Stalker's 4 base attack. So that's going to be doing 25% more damage. So for 45 points, you're going to get 25% more damage. What is that? I don't know, 60% more movement and 33% more durability. So depending on how you're building your list, whether that's going to be worth it. The runes, I guess I might as well talk about the runes now, since it's as good as time of any, because all of the runes in this warband are represented here on this at this top level. So I'm going to switch over. Keep in mind that the leader is going to take leader, obviously, and scout. The Shrike Talon takes agile, and the Spire Stalker is the only one that takes champion. So let's take a look at these abilities. Okay, so this is pretty cool. Everything in the warband gets this direct damage ability. So they can pick an enemy fighter within 8 inches, roll a dice, 3 to 5. They take 1 point of damage on a 6. They take number of damage equal to that value of the ability. So a lot of different factions have this sort of direct damage ability, and here everything in this warband gets access to that similar ability. So I do plan to do, maybe when I'm done with this faction, I'll be done with this all these starting factions as a whole. So I think by next video I'm working on one comparing different abilities, so maybe a best and worst of abilities video. So I have some of these abilities in my head because I've been looking at that stuff recently. So Raven Dart is one of many direct damage abilities in the game. The Scout, so the leader and one of the troop choices we're going to see later takes the Scout rune, and this is pretty cool. So pick an enemy fighter within 20 inches. Until the end of the battle round, a fighter cannot make disengage actions. So it's not cannot make move or disengage actions, it's just disengage actions. So that it's tricky on whether or not you want to use that because a lot of this warband might be lower. It might be low durability, so it's forcing an enemy to stay tied up to your fighters and fighting them. That very well could be the exact opposite of the thing you're trying to accomplish. But I'm going to leave that up to you tactically if that's something you're going to want, and I'll give you list options that will include more of this and less of this. Okay. The champion, this is the Spire Stalker. He's going to take Swift Climb. This is a pretty cool thematic ability, I think. So until the end of his activation, just don't count the vertical distance when the fighter's climbing. So you just get, it's basically like fly, but it's not officially fly because, you can still fall, but you can climb up very quickly. So very cool ability. And it's only a double. I like doubles because I'm much more likely to actually use them. And all right, so our Shrike Talon, he takes this rune, the Agile rune, which gives him this swooping attack. So this is a pretty amazing triple. So there's only 2 instances in the game where you basically get a conditional form of the Rampage quad in a triple ability. So this is it's rampage, but the only condition is that you need to end the bonus move 3 inches lower than when you started. So as long as you can satisfy that condition, you can use rampage on a triple with this guy. So very handy. And being a triple means that you can pull it off much more frequently than the quad. You have a good chance of not needing to spend a wild dice on it, or if you do spend a wild dice, you're probably going to get at least a double or a triple every single time you roll, and you should be able to pull this one off most turns pretty reliably. Okay. The leader takes a pretty neat ability as well here. Until the end of the round, add 1 to the attack characteristic of attacks that have range 3 or less made by visible friendly fighters while they are within 6 inches of this fighter. So this is going to be an area of effect bubble that does Onslaught. And if you've heard me gush about Onslaught's a very great ability. It outperforms quite a lot of other doubles and some triples even in the game. And the fact that this guy can do for a triple, he can make Onslaught into an area of effect bubble around himself is obviously going to be a very powerful thing. So I think that, yeah, this is going to be a great triple, one you're going to probably want to make use of. Although, unfortunately, swooping attack is such a great triple, too. So every time you get one of those triples or upgraded double, you're going to have to make this this tough choice here. Okay, and Death from Above. This is just an upgraded version of Rampage that adds 1 to the strength characteristic. And if you saw my video on strength and toughness and are they overrated or not, you probably know that I don't really think highly of adding 1 to strength as a game rule here. This isn't, while strictly speaking, it's not any worse than using Rampage. It is better than using Rampage. But it's not. This isn't a particularly great quad. Pretty much, there's a series of abilities in this game that basically give a faction an improved version of Rampage, and this is on the lower end of the spectrum. Of all those ones in the game that give an improved version of Rampage, adding 1 to the strength it's not to the strength of multiple attacks, it's only to the strength characteristic of that extra attack action. So it's not really, they get the short end of the stick here in their faction-specific quad, I think. But I'll take it, considering they have such a good double here in the Harrowing Raven, in these 2 good triples, I think. And even the Champion's Swift Climb. This is some pretty neat abilities in this faction. I think it's... I'm talking a bit more about factions now, like I said, because I just have all this factions, or the ability stuff in my head, but I'll get off the topic here. All right. Moving back to the leader and our 2 elite and semi-elite choices here. We see everything from a durability perspective is a little bit on the pricey side. It's worse than game average for points per wound and our overall points for durability. So if you haven't seen my videos before, how I work this is based on the average damage done by strength 2 attackers and the way the dice work out mathematically. Here's how many attacks it's going to take from a strength 2 attacker to kill this fighter. And, for example, here's how many attacks it's going to take from strength 6 attackers to kill this fighter. This takes into account the average damage and the average critical damage done of strength 6 specifically. So that's why those numbers look really, really significantly different as you go up the strength scale. It's not because strength is that important of a metric. It's because, more importantly, that the actual base damage and critical damage values go up drastically as you get into the higher strength tiers of fighters. So I stand by my thoughts and opinions behind strength and toughness as a game mechanic, but these numbers reflect reality of what's currently in the game fighter profiles. Okay, so we see the Shrike Talon, Shadowpiercer obviously have the most, they're your best options. These aren't great. There's nothing in this game that's over that 20 mark of durability, so it's, or in this faction that's over the 20 mark. So your toughest fighters here are going to be, they might be common troops in other factions, I mean, like, compared to, if you compare it to like Iron Jaws, the cheapest, the flimsiest troop the Iron Jaws can bring is 15 wounds and the same toughness value. So he's only just a little bit less than this. The Spire Stalker, well, actually, I guess it would be this profile would be the cheapest troop that Ironjawz could bring. So the Spirestalker, you get a good bit less durability. That 5 wounds pretty much scales down directly, and the points value for this durability is not good on any of these. So across this whole faction, pretty much the price you're paying for durability is not great. Okay, let's look at damage output. So similarly, like I did with the durability against the different strengths of attack, I've calculated how much damage this fighter does on average against the different toughness tiers. This is a much easier calculation because you don't have to average out, the number of wounds you're facing or anything. Just how much damage can this do when attacking these different toughness tiers. But if you notice, these are not directly averaged to the effective damage stat here. Effective damage is actually taking these values from the different toughness tiers and weighting them according to how frequently they occur in the fighter profile. So this should give you kind of an accurate sense of how durable or how much damage this thing should do across the whole game. So toughness 3 and toughness 4 are by far the most common, so that's going to have the biggest impact on that metric. So okay, so how much we're paying for the different for each point of damage. So we can see the Shadow Piercer is, on the lower side of average, and our Shrike Talon is on the better side of average, and Spirestalker is also on the better side of average. Notably, our hardest hitter in this warband is the Shrike Talon with a really, really solid 6.82. This is a great damage stat. It's not top tier in the game. There's things that hit at 8 and over, but very nice. You're going to feel the power of this guy on the tabletop. I feel this is strong enough where you can, one-shotting enemies, chaff enemies off the table, and even like lower level line infantry off the table is going to be a thing that happens to you. So you can imagine, see, average damage against tier 3, there's lots of, 8 wound, toughness 3 models out there, and on average, you should be cleaning one of those off per attack action. So you could kill 2 of those in one activation if you got reasonably lucky. All right. The Spirestalker, he doesn't do as much damage, but he is, since he's a good bit cheaper, he has a little bit better points value for what he does. Overall, though, I'll say the Spirestalker, if you compare him to let me just compare him to the Gryph-hound. He is slower, less wounds, the same toughness, and he does about the same damage. He's 10 points cheaper, but for 10 points, you're getting a good bit less durability and less movement. So I just don't, he's not a great buy. He's not a bad buy, but he's not, that's why he didn't make it into my best and worst of videos, because he it doesn't compare for what he does, for what he pays to some real crazy bargains out there. Okay. So I have a column here for Onslaught. So this is, you can get an idea for if you spend Onslaught, how much average, the effective damage column, how much effective damage are you doing if you spend Onslaught? Now this is per attack action. So if you spend Onslaught once, it's a double. You could potentially get 2 attack actions. So this Onslaught delta is how much benefit you're gaining from Onslaught. This is basically this column minus this damage column, you get the delta. So if you spend Onslaught once and you make 2 attack actions with it from your leader, you're going to get a benefit of 3.06 average extra damage. And I've added that here in this 2x Onslaught column. So, I will, whenever I open up the rest of the troop choices here, I'll talk about the Raven Dart ability, because we have to make choices, because Raven Dart is it's a double as well. So anytime you spend a double, you should be asking yourself, is this worth it? Is this better than Onslaught? And because a lot of times the answer is going to be no. If you don't care to study your faction or put any mental effort into playing this game well, I would just say always use Onslaught and don't think about anything else. But if you do want to try to make the best play for your points, then we'll examine Raven Dart in a little bit. So scrolling over, do we think the Shrike Talon is worth the 45 points extra? I think yes, but it's because I like that 8-inch move. This is not a slow warband at move 5, but if you were able to take multiple Shrike Talons, having multiple things doing that 8-inch move with that much crazy damage being done is with this really cool rune that basically gets you a cheap rampage. That would be a pretty nice thing to have. All right, let me hide the leader and the elite choices for a minute, and let's talk about our infantry choices. So we have 3 versions of the Kabbalist, or I think Kabbalist. Anyway, we have the version with the spear. So Kabbalist with spear for 75 points. For 10 points cheaper at 65 points, we have the standard Kabbalist. And for a cheap 60, we have a Kabbalist with familiar. So I think this is like a pet bird. And yeah, so let's make choices here. And I think I've been trying to figure out what you can actually build from the box, and because GW doesn't publish the specifics on exactly what you can build, but I think we can build quite a few of these, but I think we can only build one familiar as far as I can glean from what I've found. Okay, so everything is 8 wounds, so not much durability here. This is even though we have something here approaching bottom tier line infantry, this is strictly speaking, this is chaff. 8 wounds, 3 toughness, everything here is chaff. And for the attack profiles, we have a spear option, the Kabbalist with spear, obviously. He has range 2. And but he has range 2, and he also has 1 higher crit. So not only is he hitting from further away, but he's going to be doing more damage than the other 2. So we're going to have to be keeping in mind, is that worth, because the 15 points you're paying extra from the familiar version, or the 10 points extra you're paying from the regular version, it's going to have to come from that, really, because he had the same durability as these other 2, and no extra runes. Actually, the familiar version has a rune and he doesn't, so this is going to have to determine whether or not he's worth that extra 15 points. Okay. The familiar version, I think it's cheaper because it has 25% less attack damage output than the regular Kabbalist, but he does get a rune. Okay. So the familiar version with his cheapness makes out his points per wound comes out to be a reasonably good deal. The regular Kabbalist is an okay deal at 8.13, and the spear version comes out just on the points per wound perspective to be not a very good deal. That being said, I would say keep in mind here that with the 2-inch weapon, you're going to be able to stay out of more combats and still pull off your damage. So having a 2-inch weapon over a 1-inch weapon might actually translate to staying on the tabletop for longer. So it's kind of hard to compare a 2-inch weapon version to a 1-inch weapon on a durability perspective, because you are examining 2 kind of different beasts. Okay. So the points per attack to kill, yeah, like I said, the spear version looks like a really bad deal, and for 75 points at just 6 attacks, I mean, he's chaff, but we'll see if we think he's worth it. Let's get into the damage columns here. So this is where things start to look interesting, because that version with the spear, he does pretty good damage for 75 points. This is actually great damage for 75 points. There's a lot of things a lot more expensive than him doing this damage or lower. So, and he's doing it from 2 inches away. So this guy's a much more of an extreme fighter. You're really getting good value damage and really poor value damage durability. A safer bet is the Kabbalist, the standard Kabbalist. He's still okay damage. I think he's kind of a better just chaff choice. Depends on how you're using these rolls in the warband. He's not a bad deal durability. He's not a bad deal in his damage, but he doesn't excel at either one of those. So I think a better player maybe might end up with more spears because they're able to figure out a system to use those and use their strengths and overcome their weaknesses. So if you take one of these min-maxed units and you're able to overcome the weakness of them and get all the benefit of their strengths, then that's probably that could be a better scenario than somebody that just takes the middle of the road troops and uses them for their middle of the roadness. Anyway, the familiar version obviously does the least damage of the three. His damage output isn't that great, but he has chaff. From just a strict chaff perspective, for 60 points, if you compare him across other 60-point models, he's right up there. He's decent, not a bad deal. But I don't know if I would take too many of these. You also can't buy. I think, like I said, I think the box might only come with one. So, all right. So the onslaught deltas for these, not great because they don't, they all do a decent number of attacks and they just don't hit that hard on each of their attacks. So you don't gain too much on their onslaught. If you use onslaught, you're going to always probably prefer using it on your heavy hitting troops than your chaff troops. But if you have doubles to spare and this guy's in combat and the other people aren't, you might as well. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I think we need to talk about that Raven Dart ability. If you remember correctly, that's our direct damage ability that every troop has the access to. So it's a double, and you can select a unit within I forget the range, but within a certain range, and just deal damage depending on the dice roll. And so whether or not we choose to use that ability versus onslaught, you might not be, if you're not in combat, then you might not have a choice on using onslaught. So if you're limited to only Raven Dart because of its range, then obviously there's not much of a choice. You don't need me talking to you to determine that. But if you are needing to make a choice, you're locked into combat, and you've been using Raven Dart to get a little bit of extra damage, here is a breakdown of why that might not be a great idea. So what we have here, I apologize for reusing the spreadsheet rows, but we have the different dice number values. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So when you have your dice from your dice roll, the actual value of the dice, you can determine which of those pairs is going to be used for Raven Dart. So using it on a higher dice value is going to get you more benefit. So the question is, at what point does this outperform Onslaught? And the question is going to be, well, which fighter are you using it on, and how many attacks are they going to be able to use it? So if you activate a fighter and they have 2 actions that they can make in that activation, most of the time you're probably going to get more value from Onslaught. As you can see, even the worst troop we have here, this the Cabalist with Familiar, he's gonna, if you use Onslaught twice, you're gonna get an average of 1.43 damage done. So now that we've gone through all those abilities and talked about our troop choices, I think the troop I generally prefer in this warband is the Cabalist with Spear, even though he looks to be the worst value for durability on paper. I think that extra 1 inch of range, so his 2-inch weapon, is going to help compensate for that lack of durability, because all of your troops here have very low durability. And then apart from him, if you didn't have the points, I think I would tend toward the Cabalist with Familiar, because he at least gets that extra ability, and he's true chaff level of points. So 60 points is nice chaff, and he performs adequately as chaff. I think he's a good value for what he does. So that being said, let's talk about our MVP here. I think it's pretty clear for me the MVP of this warband is the Shrike Talon, no question. He's your only fast move option. He hits the hardest. He's a good value for how hard he hits, and even he's not a bad value for his durability if you factor in his movement. Usually when there's fast moving things in this game, they have to pay some sort of penalty either in their damage output or in their durability. So you're paying those extra points in your lack of durability here, and it's not terrible. But he's also not ridiculously fast either. He's not a move 10 or move 12 like some of the things in the game. So don't get carried away. Even though he looks like he has wings, he doesn't actually fly. But his ability is going to be great. I think that triple that gets you an extra move and attack and swooping down, it's just so thematic and potent. It's going to be really cool. So let's move on to list building. I'm going to give you first, I think I'll start with the box-friendly list. So as I've been playing with all of these chaos factions, I realize, that there's still a need out there for people that have bought a box or plan to only buy one box. You got your Christmas money from Aunt Myrtle, and you want to buy one box of this and try to get the best bang you can out of that one box. So I'm going to just give you the one box variant, and then I'm going to give you 3 lists. Well, technically one box list, and then one slightly upgraded box list, and then 2 customized, like optimized lists for people that can spare no expense and just want the best Corvus Cabal list you can build based on my analysis. So my box friendly list is going to be 1 Shadow Piercer, 1 Shrike Talon, 2 Spire Stalkers. Now, I don't generally favor the Spire Stalkers. I think they're okay, but the box comes with 2, and if they don't come with any more Shrike Talons than that, then I might as well take more Spire Stalkers. So 2 Spire Stalkers, 3 Spear Kabbalists, and I apologize if you can't build 3. It looks like I've really been trying to be diligent and figure out what you can build, and from the pictures I've seen, it really does look like you can actually build 3 of these with Spear. So I hope this is accurate. And so with the points left over after building those 3 Spear Kabbalists, I think it would be a good idea to bring at least 1 Kabbalist with the Familiar. And then it's not gonna leave you enough points left over to bring another Spear Kabbalist, so that'll bring you just enough to bring 1 regular Kabbalist. So that should be exactly 1 box. It's 9 models, so it's a horde model count, and it's 1,000 points even. I think you can build this with 1 box. Apologize if you can't. If I had to upgrade this, I think I might upgrade that 1 Kabbalist, maybe to 1 Kabbalist with a Familiar. That's actually a reduction in points, but it would give you 2 options of using that scout ability. Actually 3 if you count the leader. So yeah, but you don't need that extra 5 points, so you are technically wasting 5 points. You're getting a little bit lower damage output, but the Kabbalist isn't really a big damage dealer anyway, so I'm not sure you're even going to notice the difference. You're just going to sacrifice that rune. So I don't think the box comes with the ability to build 2 Kabbalists with Familiars, so you might need to take one of your regular Kabbalists and like green stuff up a little pet, or get some other little miniature pet from some other kit and stick him on the base and say, hey, that's his Familiar. And that's a cheap way to get this list out of just 1 box. So I think I prefer it to the base box, but I can see an argument either way if you didn't want to leave those points on the table. Okay, moving on to lists I like. So if you decided that scout ability where you can force somebody to disengage, these 2 lists are going to vary on what your opinion of that ability is, because like I mentioned when I was talking about the abilities, the forcing an enemy to not disengage with you would be a pure positive if this was a durability focused warband, but unfortunately it's a low durability warband, so forcing an enemy to stay engaged in combat with you only in certain circumstances is going to be something you're going to even want. So there's going to be some scenarios where you can maybe trip up the leader as he tries to escape your axe, or he's trying to escape with a treasure or something like that. You could maybe prevent something like that, but in general I think a lot of enemies are going to be dishing out enough damage to kill a lot of your troops. So you have to be, it's up to you on how much you want to make use of that ability or not. But it is a pretty good ability. At 20 inches, you can affect all kinds of crazy things. So the first list is going to be kind of durability focused, and it's going to try to make as much use of those 2-inch weapons as we can. So that's going to, this list attempts to overcome the weakness of this warband, which is its low durability. So starting with the Shadow Piercer, because we don't have a choice there, 2 Shrike Talons, 1 Spire Stalker, and 4 Spear Kabbalists. So I like this list. It's probably my favorite of the 2, but you do not have a an option here for the scout. You know, if you didn't mind leaving 15 points on the table, you could drop one of these spears down to a Kabbalist with Familiar. That's a lot of points to leave on the table, and I think you're leaving a lot of damage potential on the table if you drop it all the way down to a Familiar. So I don't know. This really depends on your opinion of that ability. Okay, if you really like that ability, here's my next list, and this is a split between Chaff and Elite. So not much in the middle, and as you'll see, so we have 1 Shadow Piercer leader. I'm going to go all the way up to 3 Shrike Talons, 1 Kabbalist, and 3 Kabbalists with Familiars. So this is a very min-maxed list. I'm not sure. Your weakness is that you don't have anything in the middle. You have things dealing a ton of damage, moving very quickly, and I think that's where you're going to have some clever play to make sure that those guys don't get smacked off the table very quickly. And in this case, with that many Shrike Talons, that scout ability is going to become more useful because you're going to want things to stay engaged with that Shrike Talon potentially and take an extra round. So if you have leaders and other enemy units trying to escape the clutches of that Talon, you can force them from a quite a long range away to stay engaged. So I think this is a list that kind of balances those two, but at the expense of having anything in the middle doing anything that's not a Shrike Talon or the leader here is just not a damage dealer at the end of the day. So that's all I have for you, and that concludes the starter factions. And I think next I'm going to be releasing a video on the best and worst abilities, so stay tuned for that. And then after that, I'm going to have to wait and see what the Monsters expansion looks like and what kind of video I can do on that content. But I will be taking a little break, I think. I haven't picked up a paintbrush since I started this channel, and it's time to get back to painting some grots. So, see you next time.